we don't have any dog in the fight, right? So for us, it's really about
Right.
sharing information and trying to make things better. So I think for fintechs and vendors, we're easy to talk to because we're not there to pick and choose who's the best. And that's not our role. Our role is to make sure everybody's educated and that the system and the network and payments in general are improving.
Welcome in, everybody. You're listening to Wrestling Payments, a podcast where we help payment professionals contend with the challenges of modernizing their payments operations and identifying ways to build for the future. If you're interested in payments innovation and modernization, you're in the right place. Now, let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Wrestling Payments. I'm Joe Casali, and in this episode, we're going to be talking with Sean Carter, President and CEO, and Sandy Ortins, Senior Vice President of Operations at NEACH. This broadcast is brought to you by NEACH, a member-based payment association for financial institutions and other organizations supplying payment-related services. NEACH is a specially recognized and licensed provider of ACH education, publications, and support. I work with these folks, but it's my pleasure to have known them for over a decade. If you could you give the audience a little bit of background on yourself? And can you tell you about your role here at NEACH?
Okay. I'll go first. So I've been at NEACH now this is my 24th year. So almost half of NEACH's existence. I've been here. A little less than half of my real world life. But yeah, I got into payments 24 years ago. Today, I'm primarily responsible for the strategic direction of NEACH, mainly allowing Joe and Sandy to do their thing, get out of the way, provide any resources as necessary. My journey started here at NEACH in the accounting department, then was introduced into the role, I think 2 years after that, around 1999, and just got immersed in that, and has been a passion ever since. Now with all of the new channels and new players, it's just like relearning everything again. So it's right now is a great time to be in payment.
Sandy, how about you?
So I started my banking career at 16 as a teller. I ended up in treasury management through, years of just working there. I left that institution, community bank that I was at, came to NEACH in 2011 on Valentine's Day. Anniversary's coming up. Currently at NEACH, I am overseeing education, membership, and IT. I can't do it alone. Obviously, I have great teams, but I also keep these fellow gentlemen on this call in line. I'm here to keep them young.
Excellent. Thank you. Sean, this is not a interview podcast. It really is a discussion. We hope to have discussions with real people at financial institutions, at fintechs, at companies, talking about how payments work. And in your introduction, you said you've been here 24 years, starting in the accounting department. How have things changed over that time? What was it like 24 years ago compared to today?
Tell you, I was just on a call earlier talking about the AAP exam, and people brought up how back then it was 2 SEC codes, no
Mhm.
international payments in ACH, no new settlement windows. So a dramatic change over the last 10 years specifically in ACH. And that's just a small piece, right? Because the world around payments is changing rapidly. We saw it in ACH with the rise of third parties, right, that are so critical to the network, but then you have to govern them and make sure that everybody's managing the risk in the network. And the same thing is happening for FIs today, looking for their fintech partnerships that allow them to innovate and all that touches payments, right? There's not really a growth strategy that doesn't include some form of digitalization, right? And a lot of that is related to payments. So people didn't think about that when we were just starting, right? I mean, we were always excited when we would get a new originating depository institution, right? That was a big win for us to say, oh, we have a new member FI that originates payments. And now the conversations are more about what network are you playing in? Where are you driving your customers? Who are your partners? what are you looking to invest in next? We didn't really talk about that. So to me, that's the biggest change is just the discussions are so different now than
Mhm.
they've ever been.
So I'll just comment myself. I can't agree more. I started when we were trying to get direct deposit adoption. That was it. That's all we wanted to do is get everyone on direct deposit. And today's payments, it just gets more and more exciting.
Well, Joe, think about EFT 99, right? Remember the big push to everybody went crazy because they were proposing making Social Security direct deposit mandatory,
Mhm.
right? And now today you could say that without batting an eye. Nobody would be upset if you were to say we're making this specific type of payment mandatory electronically. People would not have the same outrage and fear that they probably had in 1999. So that's not that long ago, right? As Sandy said, we're still
No,
young. So that's not that long ago.
maybe payments ages in dog years because it seems like a really long time with a lot of changes. Sandy, so, Sean and I, we here, I'm a executive vice president, Sean's president. I don't have a banking background. I don't think Sean has a banking background. Tell us, I know the members appreciate your view on things. In fact, I just read the feedback from one of your sessions and we appreciate Sandy's view on things. Can you talk about, coming from banking and now serving the financial community? What comments do you have on that? Was it useful to do that? I know you see things differently than me, but just talk a little bit about that if you could.
I guess I have a different perspective than probably what you guys have. And I know we've had conversations. I remember, Joe, years ago when the healthcare payment CCD plus rule came and you were like, everyone needs to know this. And I was like, nobody cares. Like,
Yes.
it's just going to happen, Joe. What's the big deal? And it is because I worked in that industry. Like, you care what gets you through the day. Having a CCD plus and knowing what a trace, what do they call it? It's not even a trace number,
A
Trace
reassociation.
reassociation number.
reassociation number. Like, no one, they don't care about that. They're trying to get through the day, meet all their deadlines, get everything out the door that they're supposed to. Disasters always happen, but finding out what a reassociation number is not one of them.
That
So
is
I
so.
have a different perspective.
Mhm. For the record, you were right. So we do have a little bit of prepared conversation questions. Let's start with Sean. Sean, the first question I had for you, I listen to a lot of podcasts and my thing is always, who are these people? Why am I listening to them? This is the episode that says who we are and why you may want to listen. So big picture, why is it time for NEACH to launch a podcast?
So if you think about NEACH at its core as a trade association, right? And we're here to bring information to our members so that they can strive in whatever that they're trying to do, right? And so podcast is another way to get that content out to people. And we can do it in a way that makes it easily more relatable to the listener, right? So think about going to a workshop, right? There might be 4 hours in a workshop, right? And maybe an hour and a half of that applies to your job, right? Really to your job, and you need to learn it and know it and understand it. Whereas podcasting allows very busy people, as Sandy just mentioned, folks trying to get through the day, but they still need to develop and they need to be able to bring information back to management or to help themselves become management. So I
Mhm.
think this gives them the ability, the listener, to be able to do that. And so for NEACH, we have a lot of content to share. We have a lot of contacts that can help people get through that day, which is their biggest challenge. And this is just another way to get that information to them. It's not, it's not going to replace the other things that we do because there's a role for all of this stuff, but you have to give people all the options that are available. And I think podcasting for NEACH is that next step.
Let me again go off script and take a little bit of a side road. Are payment issues only important for banks and credit unions?
No, as much as that's what reflects our membership. I mean, a lot of the challenges in payments today are because of the end users, either the sender or the receiver of the payment, which is not the financial institution. So I think for corporates, especially with all the changes that the banks go through, that ends up in their lap, right? So if a bank is going more digital, ultimately their customers have to get digital. So I do think there's a a broader audience. And again, the beauty of podcasting is you don't have to listen to them all. You listen to the ones that
Yeah.
relate to you, and you can be efficient with your time, which again is limited for everybody. So in that question, the value of podcasting comes out again.
Yeah. Thanks. So the next question is going to be an interesting question. During the development of this podcast, we landed on the name of Wrestling Payments. And we were wondering, can we really call it Wrestling Payments? Is that okay? For the record, I am an avid professional wrestling fan. I try to keep that in the closet a little bit, but how can you make an analogy of wrestling payments in the topics we approach, and why is that appropriate?
So I think for the payments industry, it is a perfect metaphor for what they're doing, right? So what's the number one move in wrestling? The grapple, right? So you
Mhm.
have to grapple each day with time, resources, where are we going to deploy? And then there's at the heart of wrestling is competition, right? And so now you see all these new players. We have Fed now, we have RTP, you have same day ACH. Not that they're fighting each other, but it is a competition, right? And who's offering the better product at the better price? Who's easier to connect to? So the financial institution and the corporate end users, they have to kind of grapple with which direction works for them and their business. So I actually think it's a perfect analogy. And when you say you're a wrestling fan, I'm using wrestling like college wrestling,
Mm.
high school wrestling, not WWE
Yeah.
wrestling. So, because I don't think we're going to see anybody pulling out what do they call them? The indiscriminate objects under the ring
Mm.
to make a payments decision. But
No.
the decisions that people make, they really grapple with these. I talk to a lot of FIs when they're asking questions, and you can tell they're really grappling with a decision. Do we offer same day to all customers, or do we do a select few? Do we make only credits or only debits, right? These are decisions that people are forced to make. And so I think it's a perfect name. As long as we don't wear outfits and do anything
No.
crazy,
No.
with
No.
it,
No.
it should be
Yes.
okay.
No, I agree. Thank you. I had to do everything to not jump in as you were saying how it was out. So the next one for you, and I think I touched on it in the previous question, but back in the day, we talked to our members, and our members were banks and credit unions. Originally, company NEACH, members were banks, credit unions came in. Do you think it's important to talk to fintechs and vendors today? And why is that? Why is it only don't just focus on our banks and credit unions?
Well, I think at the heart of it, we're still here to serve the banks and the credit unions. But the way you do that is ensuring that the vendors and the fintech people that are trying to work with them have an understanding of like Sandy mentioned, what they really go through on a daily basis. Cause I think that gets lost sometimes. And Joe, you and I talk with fintech people, they're going to solve every challenge. And sometimes they're right on. And other times it's like, no,
Yeah.
that's not going to work because that's just not how a bank, as Sandy mentioned, that's just not how they operate. But I think it's important for those conversations to happen for us because we can support the members through not pre-qualifying or I can't think of the word, but almost when we're working with a vendor or a fintech that wants to deal with an FI, we can help those conversations and help the fintech feel a little more aware of what they should be discussing. And there's regulation that tells them what they need to do. And
Mhm.
that's easy to go through those checklists. Oh yeah, I have an audit. I have a risk assessment. But it's that stuff Sandy talked about. That's really important. What is this going to do to our resources? How do you see fraud in this space? And those are the conversations we can have with vendors and fintechs. We don't have any dog in the fight, right? So for us, it's really about
Right.
sharing information and trying to make things better. So I think for fintechs and vendors, we're easy to talk to because we're not there to pick and choose who's the best. And that's not our role. Our role is to make sure everybody's educated and that the system and the network and payments in general are improving. So we're like that good friend you can talk to when something go wrong because they're not going to just keep bashing you down, but they're not going to tell you you're the best thing ever, right? They're just going to be able to give good guidance. That's how I see NEACH with fintechs and vendors. And conversely, too, when a bank's reaching out about a problem they're having, we could sometimes with that conversation, well, here's why the fintech thinks that way, or here's why a vendor set up, the way that you track originator IDs. This is why they set up their system. Right? It's
Mhm.
not bad. It's not good. It's just, this is why they did it. So I
Mhm.
think we can be that for all sides of that conversation.
I do agree. One of the things I enjoy is that we aren't, we're not here to sell a product. We're not here to sell a solution. We're here to talk about the issues about being compliant with payment rules, avoiding risk, avoiding fraud. We're not here to sell you the next widget. And it does give us the ability to just be impartial. All right. Last question for you. I know we've been working on developing this podcast for a little bit. What are you expecting to hear from the podcast as it grows and evolves?
So I think what you guys talked about at the beginning, just the real people, right? And I always laugh when I watch commercial and they say, this is a real person, not an actor. It's like, of course they're real, right? But I think what Sandy talked about is that person trying to get through the day, that those are the stories and how they're managing their vendors and thinking about strategy and how they're going to grapple and what decisions are going to make when they make those tough decisions, what goes into that decision, right? Because I think other people in that position listening to those stories, they're going to feel better because once you realize someone else is going through something, you feel better. But they're also going to maybe get some nuggets that they haven't thought about, right? Somebody
Mhm.
that's gone through the battle, gone through the match, right? They can tell you kind of how it ended. And I think those people, we've talked about NEACH has access to some of the brightest minds and the greatest speakers in the industry. And I'm sure we'll get some of those folks, but this isn't about that. This is about helping people, right? And giving them content that gets them from A to B and maybe B to F a little bit easier than it would have been without the podcast. So that's where I'm interested most, excites me the most. I'm sure there's a couple speakers will line up that
Mhm.
everybody will be jazzed up to listen and we'll be listening. But I think the bigger picture of this is the regular people, the people in the trenches that they're dealing with a lot right now. Let's no mistake about it. I mean, the fraud alone, with the questions we get here, with people having to do that every day, and still with an eye towards the future. And I'm amazed at what our members do on a daily basis, to be honest. And whatever we can do to help, that's what our role will be. So that's what I look forward to in the podcast.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Sandy, over to you. What's it been like in the industry for leaders in operations and staff? You're right there. You're talking about education. What do people need to know? How do I provide it to them? You are also in charge of membership. Who are the members? What are they saying? What responses are they giving us of their interest? And you've been here for a little while. So how have you seen the industry leaders struggle, adapt with their staff as payments change?
So a lot's been going on in payments, and you have all of these conversations about FedNow and RTP and instant payments, Sell, get on board. You have to get on board. And then you have one of them in the news and now they're getting sued. It's like, oh, was that a good idea? It's that battle of what should I be doing? What is the right thing for the institution? How do I serve our client base, but also protect the reputation of the institution? And for me, I don't have an answer for them. I don't know what their best option is. I think they need to decide as a financial institution. In terms of their staff, I used to be able to call a lot of our members and know who was answering the phone and have a conversation with them. That's not really the case anymore. I mean, we still know a lot of folks, but there's a lot of newer folks coming in. And I think that's great. I think, bring in some fresh blood, some new perspectives, but the great resignation, all of our long-standing members who were, friends of NEACH have moved on or retired. And now we're trying to build new relationships. And it's a struggle and for me in the membership side and in the education side to be that voice for them and help them. We are definitely making strides. We are doing everything, but they have their own feelings on how things should work, and they have their own ideas of what faster or instant payments should be. And, I don't know if any of those ideas are reckless ideas just because, well, that's what they're doing. So why don't we do it? And I am very risk adverse. I am definitely like, slow down, give it 6 months, let the FI across the street mess up, and then we'll jump in. That is
So,
definitely me. So trying to speed up my thought process and helping them get to the best educated decision, I think is a struggle with leadership.
mhm. So I have an unscripted question,
Mm,
and I promise no surprises, but this one may not make the final cut, but I'll ask anyway. In the introduction,
okay.
you mentioned healthcare payments and how I
Oh,
was,
yeah.
the sky is falling, the sky is falling. In that same vein, faster payments, instant payments. The sky is falling. Everyone's got to get on instant payments.
Yeah. So I'm not that person. And I think this is where we differ, right? And I think that's fine. I don't know if I'll be right at the end of this. I think
Mhm.
that there is a need for instant payments in a certain aspect in the financial industry. I don't know if it has to be the end all be all that everyone has to jump on, or that's it. It's the end of you. I think community financial institutions will always have a stronghold in their community because they are in their community, they're activists in their community, they support their community. And I still bank at the institution that I worked at because my mom banked there. So now I bank there and my son's savings account is there. That's not going to stop. You know that I trug him into the branch to get his lollipop because I believe in community banking. So my institution doesn't have Zelle. I'm okay with that. Not everyone is me. But I think that there is a need for some areas to offer a service. I just don't know if it has to be right now, right this second.
Excellent. That sounds like it's going to make the final cut. Segue. What are those same folks struggling with today? What are they facing? What do you think today, this year? What do you think financial institutions are saying? We have to solve this, upgrade this, change this, address this year.
I have received, and our staff have received more fraud calls than I have ever recognized in our rules hotline tracking. And it is everywhere from check fraud, PayPal, Venmo. I mean, it's coming from everywhere. And the hard part is that there's no way to stop it. You can't stop fraud. They're going to find a way in. It's how can you put up all of your parameters to try to mitigate it? But then you're at the point where you're putting so many parameters that you might as well just go back to, everyone has to come into the branch to make their deposit.
Mhm.
So it's a struggle between offering services and fraud mitigation.
Super interesting. I agree. Yesterday, I got a call about a check that turned into a Venmo. That was a fraudulent check, and the person ended up being responsible for that fraudulent check. It was hard,
Yeah.
hard.
And
Um,
it definitely started during COVID with all of the unemployment fraud.
mm,
And I don't know if all of these unemployed folks decided, well, I can really make money on this. And
yeah.
now they're just escalating to other payment channels.
And that is not the innovation we'll be covering on this show.
No.
All right. So I know secretly Sean is a wrestling fan. How about you? Do any comments, thoughts?
I am so not gonna lie. I used to watch wrestling growing up. Ultimate Warrior was like my hero. And I watched I think it's on the behind the ropes.
Yep.
It's always like the rivals.
Mhm.
I don't anymore. I think since I probably started middle school, but I loved the Ultimate Warrior. Loved him. I even had the action figures.
Yes. Awesome. 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 So we're getting towards the end. Do you guys, either of you have anything else you want to say? I can go into the close or we can chat a little bit more.
I do want the NEACH members not to panic that our executive team believes that he fixed matches and
What?
tomfoolery
Fixed?
entertainment. We do come to work every day and do the right thing. So we just have this little weird thing that we've all enjoyed at points of our life. And so I do want to be clear on that. So for the listeners.
Okay.
Disclaimer from the CEO. We're not all fools.
Yeah. I can picture somebody watching this go, that's why they can't help us with fraud. Look what they fall for. So
Very good point.
No, Ricky said. Okay. All right. Well, thank you both for joining me. This is the inaugural. It's going to be the launch episode. Hopefully people got a background for where we're coming from and what we hope to offer. We are very at home in the payments arena. We see people wrestle with different things every day. Our initial focus for the podcast is going to be on careers in payments. How has careers changed, especially since COVID? Are there new skills? We're going to kind of dig into that a little bit. The other thing is, how have payments changed? We now, we used to have 3 or 4 payment rails. Now we have 6, depending how you look at it. We're going to be digging into that. I encourage you to subscribe and leave some comments. And a comment to the podcast is, I know where we're starting. I don't know where we're going to end up. We can go down any road with payments that the audience wants to hear. We have a lot of resources. We aren't interested in selling anything. So please give us your feedback and questions. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for joining me, guys.
On behalf of NEACH, your trusted resource in payments, and our guests, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning into the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more about payments innovation and modernization, you can find the Wrestling Payments Podcast on the podcast page of NEACH.org or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Just search for Wrestling Payments in your podcast app. Thanks for listening.